Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Khaldoun Azhari. I'm the president of this club, and I'm moderating this event today. Let me introduce our guest today. At the very right is Mr. Frederick Siao. He's a member of the House of Representatives in the Philippines, and he's a businessman and specialized in investment, his other job. And to his very left is Mr. Harry Roque. He's also a member of the House of Representatives of Philippines, and he is a lawyer and also former professor of international relations, international law. And to my very right is Mr. Thang. He's director of the advisory bureau of the Vietnam Foreign Ministry, and he was former ambassador of his country to Netherlands, and also he was editor of publication by the Vietnam Weekly, yes, of the Vietnam Foreign Ministry. So he's kind of colleague of us, basically. And today they will speak about this very important issue, resolution of South China Sea disputes. I'm not sure if we can find a resolution today, but they will give us great insights about these issues that are getting headlines all the time, especially recently. And every speaker will talk for a short time, and we will have questions and answers following that. As you see, we don't have interpreters, so it will be all in English today. We are very lucky we'll have more time to hear more about the issue from them. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest speaker. Thank you. Yes. Harry, start. Yes. Whatever.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Frederick Siao. I'm one of the many representatives of the different district in our Congress, the House of Representatives in Manila. I'm the district representative of Iligan City, which is a city in Mindanao, and I'm members of 10 different committees. I'm a vice committee chair of the Committee on Tourism, member of Public Works and Highways, member of Appropriation, member of Accounts, member of East Asia Growth Area, and member of Economic Affairs, Mindanao Affairs, and so on and so forth. I have 10 different committees. I'm very grateful that I was invited today, and we can share our insights on matters concerning the South China Sea, or the West Philippine Seas, as we called it. And we're very hopeful that with this development right now, the relation between the Philippines and China is improving for us. It would bring more goodwill and investment to our country. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to everybody. Yeah, my name Thang, Dinh Hoang Thang. I was the ambassador of Vietnam to the Netherlands, and former chief advisor of the consultative group. Sorry? Yeah. Okay. I hope everybody can hear me, huh? Yeah. I am retired ambassador, and right now I have been working for the Institute of the Development Issue of Vietnam. In our institute, we have a very special program. We call it Wisdom for Preservation of the is sea. We call South China Sea is sea. And I just spoke to my Philippine friends before, 5 minutes before that. We would like very much to propose one day we would like to change the South China Sea, to rename the South China Sea to Southeast Asia Sea, in order to avoid all misunderstanding in the China words in this term. Well, today it's my honor and pleasure to have your company, and I'm ready to give any answer to your question. I just to tell only one thing. There's in order to promote, to support our sovereignty and to claim our sovereignty of our occupied island. We recently have been working very hard on structure and promote a new paradigm. We call it PDAO paradigm. PDAO is, you know, like 5 letters of English. P as partnership, that I'm thinking about here, this strategic partnership of Vietnam with all P5. And D as a democratization process. It means we would like very much to promote democratization process in Vietnam. Because without without inside strength, it is very difficult to promote a strategic partnership with P5. And without strategic partnership with P5, it's very difficult to promote the renovation, or we call it đổi mới. It means we try to put Vietnam to process of the democratization. And O is mean combination of the legal and legal and media front, because after PCA, we think that even like Philippines, Vietnamese, we have hope to promote the activities in this field according to the law, but only law is not enough. We have to promote very strongly in media front. And W, it means wisdom to protect. That you see after PCA, all the country a little bit, they have the low profile. Even the United States, they have the silent diplomacy. After PCA, that we don't want to make the China to be lose face. N mean networking, that P down. N mean networking, that we want to promote, we want to develop the networking through TPP and RCEP, the 2 big trade bloc initiated by United States and China. Thank you very much, and I'm ready to give any answer to your question. Thank you. Thank you again.
Good afternoon to all of you. Prior to my election to Congress this May, I was a professor of international law in the University of the Philippines. I was also director of the Institute of International Legal Studies of the University of the Philippines Law Center. I was the first to recommend that we resort to arbitration when we lost Scarborough Shoal or Panatag to the Chinese. Even Justice Carpio of the Philippine Supreme Court wanted compulsory conciliation at that time. Of course, at that time, the Department of Foreign Affairs was against my proposition, arguing that it was better to negotiate with China. But of course, I was happy that my advice was heeded by the President, and the arbitration ultimately was decided to be the Philippine response to the illegal use of force of China in Panatag. I say that there was illegal use of force because our fishermen were forcibly displaced from traditional fishing grounds by fully armed Chinese Coast Guard. As you know, China has a long-standing policy of not utilizing its navy in what it describes as patrol of its coastal waters. Now that we have won, we have to manage expectations. We did not win much in that arbitral award. The most that we got is a clarification that China cannot rely on historic claims of water in claiming 95% of the South China Sea. And that is what the arbitral tribunal decided when it said that the 9 dashed lines was bereft of legal basis. We also had a significant clarification of issues when the tribunal decided that the 4 islands currently being used by China as military bases, all 4 are artificial islands, are within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, and therefore, according to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, they pertain to the Philippines. Beyond that, the tribunal did not really say anything else because of limited jurisdiction. As you know, the tribunal only has jurisdiction over issues of interpretation and application of provisions of the UNCLOS, which relates to the seas and not to land. Meaning to say that even after we have won, and it was a clear, resounding victory, the territorial dispute with China continues. Now, it is in this regard that I have been very supportive of the position taken by President Duterte. Why do I support him? Number one, despite the victory in the arbitral tribunal, we still have the ongoing territorial dispute. Even our victory on Scarborough is limited. We wanted a declaration that Scarborough was part of the Philippine EEZ and therefore only Filipino fishermen can fish in Scarborough. We did not succeed in this regard. Instead, the tribunal said that the Philippines, China, and Vietnam have historic fishing rights in Scarborough. As far as the territorial dispute on disputed land is concerned, it persists and was not at all addressed by the tribunal. Now that the tribunal has said that we all have traditional fishing rights in the Scarborough, the reality is only China has a military presence in Scarborough. We were kicked out of Scarborough in 2012, and despite the mutual defense treaty that we have in the United States did not lift a finger to assist us in 2012. Need I remind you also that in the 90s, when China took over Mischief Reef, despite our mutual defense treaty with the United States also did not lift a finger. And that is why, in the context of the arbitral award that we all have traditional fishing rights, it's important to agree with China and Vietnam on how to go about fishing in Scarborough Shoal. You don't achieve an agreement by provoking China. You achieve an agreement by fostering closer relationship with China, albeit in the context of the arbitral decision. That, I believe, is what Duterte did. And for the record, our fishermen are fishing in Scarborough again. Perhaps I have to declare that I'm officially legal counsel to the fishermen who were displaced in Panatag. Until today, we have pending communications with the UN Committee on Human Rights, Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and on Special Rapporteurs on the right to food and the right to livelihood, arising from the forcible eviction of our fishermen from Scarborough. In other words, what I'm saying is fishing could not have resumed had we followed the American advice to continue our antagonistic attitude towards China. I will probably end by sharing with you an anecdote. In my previous position as director of the Institute of International Legal Studies, that is actually a creation of Congress. And we are basically the think tank on international legal affairs issues. No? So in that capacity, I've been invited by CNTV, the Chinese CNN, for debates on Scarborough Shoal and on the disputed Spratlys group of islands. Now, in all the invitations I've had, there's always a very high-ranking Chinese official on the other side. And when they address their questions or their remarks to me, it is as if they're addressing the Americans. So a consistent position that I have taken in these TV guestings is to insist that the Philippines is a separate state from the United States and that whatever quarrel China has with the United States, it should continue to persist or to continue as far as the United States is concerned, but the Philippines, being a separate country, should be spared from any such disagreement. It does not help, of course, that we have allowed our territory to be used by American forces through the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. And that is why China then thought of the Philippines as nothing but an extension of the United States. With the independent foreign policy being pursued by President Digong, I believe the Chinese have finally realized that we are actually an independent state. We have our own national interest distinct from the American national interest. As far as America is concerned, we give America all the opportunity. As I said, we lost 2 of our islands, despite the fact that we have a mutual defense treaty that they should have come to our rescue, and they never did. The reality, of course, is much as America wants the Philippines to be its closest ally against China, the United States, meanwhile, wants also to be the best friend of China, being the biggest creditor and being the biggest market for both China and for American goods. The biggest market as well is the China market. So I end my presentation there and would welcome questions from the floor.
Thank you for your insights. We'd like to open the floor for questions about the Southeast Asian Sea, basically. Thank you, as you described it, Anthony.
Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. So the fact that President Duterte agreed in China to set aside temporarily the arbitration award question, has that diluted the influence of international law, do you think, in this region? And also, will it encourage other members of ASEAN to approach China in a more bilateral sense, in other words, to solve their own territorial disputes by bilateral means rather than appealing to international law?
Let me correct you. We have not set aside the arbitral decision. The consistent position of the Philippine government has been all negotiations will take place in the context of the arbitral decision.
At least it was said it was put aside temporarily, as I understand it.
No, it was not, because the issue of fishing in Scarborough, the decision is all countries have the right to fish, because Scarborough is a traditional fishing grounds for Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese fishermen.
Okay, well,
so
let me rephrase the question then. Has President Duterte's general approach to China diluted the authority of international law? I'm addressing this to all the panelists. And as I said, and will this encourage a more bilateral approach by other ASEAN members towards disputes with China?
Well, let me clarify. No? I'm actually deputy minority leader in Congress. I'm in the minority because I do not support the president's position reimposing the death penalty, the reducing the age of criminal responsibility, and the shift to federalism. But I am his staunchest supporter on foreign policy. I was part of this official delegation to the state visit to China, and the only reason why I did not take part of the working visit here in Japan is because I have this trip previously arranged. So I said it's superfluous for me to join that working trip. I'd like to reiterate that at no point in time have we abandoned the decision. Why? Regardless of the position of the Chinese on the efficacy of that arbitral decision, the reality is the arbitral decision is there. The Philippine position, the Duterte position, is that the arbitral tribunal is the final law on the matter. As far as Scarborough is concerned, the final law on the matter is we all have traditional fishing rights, and the fact that we have resumed fishing rights is because we have traditional fishing rights. Now, what I do have to concede is the Chinese would not have agreed, let's not use the word agreed, because there is no formal agreement yet on resumption of fishing, because the Chinese want to use the word allow and permit. Whereas the Philippine government is rejecting it because you don't need permission or agreement to fish, since we all have traditional fishing rights in the area. That's the only reason why no written agreement was announced at the end of the state visit. But the reason why fishing has resumed is that Chinese Coast Guard are no longer preventing our fishermen from fishing. What I understand is physically the Coast Guard has left the immediate area of the Scarborough Shoal. They are still within striking distance, but they have left the traditional fishing grounds. And so what has facilitated this is the friendlier ties that we have developed with China as a result of the state visit. But let me reiterate, at no point in time has President Duterte said that we have in any way renounced the arbitral tribunal. That would be, quite frankly, a stupid act to do, because it's to our favor, and you don't waive something that is favorable to you. But what we have done is we have resorted to friendlier ties as a way of facilitating what the arbitral tribunal ruled as far as fishing in Scarborough is concerned. Now, we have not in any way weakened international law, because, as I said, the decision is of very limited utility. It only says that the 9 dashed lines has no legal basis. We have sovereign rights over the artificial islands built by China, and that it was wrong, therefore, for China to disallow Filipino fishermen from fishing in Scarborough. But that's all the decision that we got. Now that the arbitration tribunal has finally ruled, we now have to go back to the negotiating table and talk about the disputed islands. Now, I'm publishing a paper in the Asian Society of International Law proposing how I think the Philippine government should resolve this. Now, this was also how arbitration took off. I published an article in a newspaper. No? So I'm hoping that policymakers, well, now that I'm a member of Congress, and although I am not officially an ally of the president, I have been invited to form part of his official delegation in a state visit. I would say a close guest of the administration. That's how he described me in China. I am a guest of his entourage, because officially I'm not part of the administration. I'm in the minority, no? But even as a guest of the presidential entourage, I reiterate, I support his pursuit of an independent foreign policy, even if I have major disagreements with him, including on the issue of extralegal killings. Incidentally, before I joined Congress, I was counseled to organize media groups such as the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, and until today, my firm represents the media victims of the Ampatuan massacre, the worst and deadliest attack on journalists worldwide.
I don't have a special comment on this issue, but I think our Philippine friend, they choose a correct method, because they first time they had very strong will to bring China to court, but after they won, of course they have reconsidered the impact, the implication of the PCA ruling to the further situation. And I think as a medium country like Vietnam and Philippines, this is correct method. Thank you.
Next question.
I will single out the former Foreign Secretary of the Philippines, Secretary Del Rosario. I would call him an American lackey. I would call him as for being responsible for the Filipino fishermen's dispossession of Panatag. And since he's stuck in dealing with the Americans, with China, and that is to be very close ally of the US and to be antagonistic to China, did not work, I hope Secretary Del Rosario will shut up and will recognize the gains made by President Duterte.
All right, please.
Secretary.
Antkin.
Ambassador.
Former Secretary.
Siegfried Knittel, writing for an Austrian newspaper, Der Standard. In which way should the countries of the East Asian Sea negotiate with China? Is kind of a multilateral way in negotiations or a bilateral way? The Americans also think about the multilateral way is much better, because every country, the countries around the South China Sea are very small countries, and they depend on in economy terms from China. So, do you think it would be better to negotiate in a multilateral way with China or a bilateral way?
It depends what you're talking about. Although we refer to it as the Spratly's Islands dispute, not all of the islands are disputed by all the claimant countries. For instance, Scarborough Shoal is not even part of the Spratlys Group. And that's only disputed between the Philippines and China. Yes. So why should there be multilateral talks in a dispute that only involves China and the Philippines? As far as Scarborough is concerned, it will have to be bilateral. Now, insofar as areas of the Spratlys are claimed by at least 5 countries, obviously, multilateral approach will have to be resorted to because there are 5 claimant countries. I do not know if Vietnam will agree, but the paracels is only contested between China and Vietnam. Why should the Philippines care about the paracels? We're not claiming the paracels. So I would say, as far as paracels and the Paracels Islands are concerned, then it should be bilateral. No? Now, insofar as China has in the past threatened to treat the South China Sea as part of its municipal waters, obviously that is a concern for the international community because we all have our interest in maintaining freedom of navigation over the high seas. No? But insofar as the individual islands are concerned, it will have to be bilateral or multilateral depending on what island groups you're talking about. So I think it is foolish for anyone to insist on either wholly multilateral or wholly bilateral because you're not talking of a single group of islands being claimed by identical claimants. I do not know if our Vietnamese colleague has a similar or different position.
Can I? Yeah, I completely agree with my friend's opinion and comment in this issue. In the case of Vietnam, you know that parallel is just a bilateral dispute. Yes, of course, in this issue, we should have the direct negotiation with China. And the other group, partly dispute is concerning 6 countries, and therefore, of course, here we need the multilateralization. But here I would like to focus on one very important question. That China, in all the cases, China always insists on bilateral negotiation because actually China wants to make the South China Sea to change the South China Sea into the kind of the cooperation of the South China Sea. And if they begin to negotiate by bilateral basis to each all country, in the end, they begin the most part of the sea. And you can imagine as a cooperation, they became the biggest shareholder in this one. And it is very, very important to know that. And we always focus that, as my friend mentioned before, that what is the concerning to the 5-6 countries is multilateralization. It is cannot to make the negotiation on the bilateral relationship.
Although the Japanese media is, I think, not very much represented here, no? I'd like to state that perhaps the experience of the Philippines is that we were treated like poor relations of America. This is why Obama promised Japan that if China would attack Senkaku Island, they will defend Japan. But when it comes to the Philippines, all that Obama could say was, we hope you will resolve it on the basis of international law. And the reason for it, of course, is twofold. One, America did not disarm the Philippines at the end of World War II and did not undertake its national defense. Obviously, that's what they did here in Japan. And number 2, America does not even recognize our title to the disputed islands of the Spratlys. That's the truth. The Americans maintain that when they purchased us from Spain, they only bought land territories, not maritime. Never mind that what was described in the sale was archipelago, and archipelago consists of islands and waters forming a unitary whole. And that is why I don't think we could be blamed for this decision now to pivot to Asia, because America has always treated us like a poor relative, at least compared to Japan. And we have finally had it. Now, I'd like to reiterate that I was there, I was in the room when the president had bilateral discussions with the Chinese premier. And what the president said was, henceforth, the Philippines will turn to Asia for its future. And he specified China, Japan, and Russia. And he said that this is because the US is simply too far away from it.
Ken?
Hi, I'm Ken Moritsugu from the Associated Press. I had a question for the ambassador from Vietnam. In light of President Duterte's shift in Philippine policy, since he's trying to distance the Philippines a little bit from the U.S. and cooperate more with China, does the Philippines doing that, first of all, have any impact on Vietnam and Vietnam's position in these issues? And secondly, do you think that Vietnam should also perhaps adopt a similar approach?
I think, as I mentioned before, the country like Vietnam and Philippines is, for a country like Vietnam and Philippines, the most challenging issue is how to construct and maintain the balance among the big powers. And here I don't see the big differences between the approach of the Philippines and Vietnam in this issue. Maybe the difference is, we can talk about the difference about the method, the way of doing, the way of expressing the differences. Of course, after Philippines have some change in their approach after PCA, we think that we need time to follow up, and we need time to know that how far we impact on the other ASEAN country. Until now, I think from the Vietnam part, we support any position of the Philippines in to keep the balance between the big powers.
Yes.
What is the second question? That Vietnam, we change the same. I think until now, Vietnam always keep the line, the independent line of the foreign policy, that we don't want to rely on any superpower or the big power to maintain our independence and sovereignty. I think in this case we need the collective support, the collective cooperation, first of all among the ASEAN countries, and of course at the global level we need the support, we need the cooperation among not only the US, China, but we would like to have very strong role of the Japan. And in this case, we think that Japan has very important role when the things has been changing in the region. We can see very clearly the role of Japan through the President Duterte visit to Japan recently. Yes.
Although the question was not addressed to me, let me mention that I've filed a resolution in Philippine Congress for the executive to prioritize the negotiation of a treaty on joint fishing and joint patrol in the Scarborough Shoal, patterned after the joint fishing and joint protection treaty that Vietnam entered into with China. So many of you will probably be surprised that with Vietnam recently engaging in boat ramming incidents with China, that they actually have a joint fishing agreement with China, which we hope to emulate.
Thanks. Anthony.
just wanted to make sure that I understood what Mr. Roque said. I think you said that you will now go back and propose a meeting with China to talk about the territorial issues, right? That is the Scarborough Shoal, right?
That's not.
What
You see, again, we have to distinguish what we're talking about. Scarborough is fully settled. The tribunal said that there's traditional fishing grounds. What now remains unresolved are the disputed islands of the Spratlys. Remember, we claim 8 of the islands. China occupies 7 artificial islands. Vietnam occupies about how many?
20
Outside of the Paracels, because Paracels is a lot, no? But and then Itoaba is under the occupation of Taiwan, no? So that is now what is still unresolved. Who owns the islands? Because it cannot be addressed by the UN, by the UNCLOS tribunal, because land is different from the sea, no? So actually, I'll give you a preview of what I will be publishing, no? It's easier now because 9-dash lines was declared to be out with no legal merit. So now, none of the claimant countries are saying that any of the islands can generate EEZs. So the most that they are claiming are individual islands now and 12 nautical miles of territorial sea. So that will simplify, I think, a peaceful resolution of the matter. Furthermore, the 4 islands have been decided already by the tribunal. They are, in fact, artificial islands found within the Philippine EEZ. So we can reduce the 4 from the 7 that are occupied by China, leaving 3 disputed islands in the Spratlys. Although China still has many islands unresolved with Vietnam on the Paracels. So that is what I meant, because the dispute over islands remains. Because the UNCLOS, as a tribunal on the law of the sea, has no jurisdiction to rule on the issue of title and sovereignty over single disputed islands.
I'm Khalil, I'm Ambassador of Bahrain. Thank you very much for coming here and let us know more about your experience. In the last 100 years, the world found out without peace, there's no prosperity. My question to you, from your experience, what you will advise Japanese to do?
It was difficult to advise the Philippine government as it was. Japan is more complicated because of the reality that it was disarmed by America at the end of World War II. And it has to rely on the United States for its defense. My general advice is, pursuant to international law, all countries have a duty to refrain from the use of force, even the threat to use force. So Senkaku Island should be resolved peacefully. Is it Senkaku or Senkaku? How do you pronounce it? Senkaku. How do you pronounce it? Senkaku. Senkaku. So Senkaku should be resolved peacefully. It should not be resolved through the use of force. And my personal advice is, from the Philippine experience, from what we've seen so far, friendlier ties with China can be more productive rather than confrontational approach. Now, I'm also, and let me bring this up, I'm also counsel to the remaining Filipino comfort women in the Philippines. Okay? And I'm bringing this up ultimately to say that under international law, we all have to abide with treaty obligations. There's a duty to refrain from the use of force and to resolve all pending disputes peacefully. It's also an appeal that if we want to be protected by international law, we should also comply with our obligations under international law. I say this because Japan has neither apologized nor given compensation to the Filipinos who are victims of mass rape during World War II.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Dan Slater, regular member of the club. I'm wondering if you feel that the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea has exacerbated the situation in the South China Sea, and whether you think that if that had never occurred and there was only the freedom of the seas, the mare liberum concept as it existed before UNCLOS, that the situation would not be as antagonistic as it is now between the various belligerent parties. Not belligerent, but the antagonistic parties.
On the contrary, despite the public pronouncements of China, its recent actions would indicate that it is in conformity with international law. You know, a couple of months back, Russia also said they will not recognize the tribunal's decision, the ITLO's jurisdiction on several Greenpeace members that it accused of piracy. Eventually, they freed the suspected pirates, even if they said, we do not recognize the jurisdiction of ITLOS. The same thing with China. We do not recognize the jurisdiction of ITLOS. We do not consider its decisions binding. But as of last week, my clients have resumed fishing in Panatag. That would indicate that they still recognize the binding decision of the ITLOS, even if verbally they say the contrary. So my position is, number one, these recent developments has strengthened the binding nature of international law, if only because China has shown that it has complied with an aspect of the decision of the ITLOS tribunal, in the same way that the Russian decision to free the Greenpeace activists has also resulted in the strengthening of the normative value of UNCLOS. The only state that has not done its share so far is the United States, because they have not ratified UNCLOS, even if its state practice, in fairness, has been consistent with UNCLOS. So, in brief, I think recent developments would show that this incident in the Scarborough Shoal has strengthened the normative value of UNCLOS rather than weakened it. I have to say I miss this kind of discussion now that I'm in the Philippine Congress.
Süddeutsche Zeitung, Neidad. I was just going to say it feels very refreshing to hear such clear words from this table. We don't hear that so often. But
I think I'll go back to the academe.
By criticizing the United States confrontational words, and especially words, and at the same time criticizing them for not doing anything to help the Philippines in previous cases, do you imply criticism of Japan as well? Because Japan is the rich relative, but as opposed to the Philippines, Japan doesn't really distinguish its foreign policy from the American foreign policy, maybe rather the opposite. Do you imply, and Japan's foreign policy, especially toward China, has become much more confrontational the last few years, which is exactly the opposite of what you recommend. By criticizing the US, do you imply criticism of Japan?
Well, let me distinguish it, because Japan had no choice. When it was disarmed at the end of World War II, and when America guaranteed that it shall provide its security needs, Japan lost its independence as far as its foreign policy is concerned, whether we like it or not. And that is why it cannot take any a position which is in any way different from the position of the United States for as long as it is dependent on the United States for its security needs. At the same time, paradoxically, now that there's debate about rearming Japan, people in Southeast Asia are also still rather apprehensive because they still remember World War II. Yes, many of those who lived through World War II are very old, are probably dead, but they have told their tale to modern-day Southeast Asian citizens. No? So, Japan is more complicated. I don't really know what advice to give, other than perhaps Japan should realize that there is no alternative to having your own means to defend yourself, because ultimately, in the realm of foreign relations, national interests will only be upheld and promoted by different nationalities. You cannot rely on a foreign state to take care of your national interests.
I would like just to ask a question. You mentioned that the name of the South China Sea should be Southeast Asian Sea. And can you tell me, like, what the prospects of this name being changed, and what about the East China Sea? And we have also name problem between Japan and Korea, the Sea of Japan and the East Sea. So there's other disputes about the names in the area. So what is like Philippines and Vietnam's policy officially on this, and how do you think this can, make the problem worse or better? Thank you.
Well, as far as the Philippines is concerned, although we refer to it as West Philippine Sea, we have not complied with international procedure to rename it. So it's more of a political gimmick that we have called it West Philippine Sea, but it has no validity internationally because we have not complied with publication requirement in order to rename the body of water. Although this is the first time I heard the suggestion about renaming it as Southeast Asian Sea, I will certainly file a bill with the indulgence of our Vietnamese colleague, renaming the West Philippine Sea as Southeast Asia Sea. But I do not know how he will respond to the question, what about the Yellow Sea between Korea and Japan, and the other disputed waters, So I do not know how to answer that because we have no claim to those bodies of water, only the South China Sea.
Can I add to that? With regards to the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea, as proposed by our colleague from Vietnam, well, as long as the result will come out mutually beneficial to all, then I would agree. As long as there proper collaboration and cooperation with the different members of the ASEAN or the Southeast Asian countries with the cooperation of China especially, it will be in result it will be very good for us. Then I think nobody will question that, and everybody will agree and cooperate.
Yes. Yeah. Yes,
My short comment on this issue that, first of all, this issue should be raised by the ASEAN country. Of course, it's a difficult question that we can arrange a consensus. Of course, I think about the majority consensus, not about the absolute consensus. Okay, because organization like ASEAN is very difficult to reach the absolute consensus. We're talking about the majority consensus in this case. ASEAN, we can discuss first in framework of the ASEAN, and after that we can propose to the UN, and we think about publication, as you said before. It is not a short process. I think it is long, but sooner or later, I think all the members of the ASEAN country should think about that. Yes.
Dan Slater, regular member. This is perhaps for the benefit of people that live far away from Asia, but who do see the conflicts multiplying in the South China Sea. To what extent does the risk of a general conflagration, military action on a serious scale between multiple countries, exist in the South China Sea, in your opinion?
I think the recent developments has decreased tension. Yeah. Let's face it, when the Philippines was perceived as nothing but a lackey of the Americans, it was more tense because anything that we did was construed by Beijing as an aggressive act on the part of the United States. I think this recent rapprochement would indicate that with the friendlier ties between China and the Philippines, there should be less tension in the South China Sea. Now, I do not know what the Americans intend to do. But if it is freedom of navigation, I do not think that there is anything that China has said or done that would imperil freedom of navigation. China should realize that any conflict in the South China Sea will also have dire consequences for China, if only because it also imports oil from the Middle East that have to be transported also from the South China Sea. So I think there is now a recognition that any outburst or any armed conflict in the South China Sea will have dire consequences for all states that still import their oil requirements from the Middle East for as long as these pass through the Gulf of the Strait of Malacca up to the South China Sea.
Follow up? Yeah.
No, I don't have the special comment on this issue because I think first of all, each country in this region, they have, of course, different interests, own interests. But it's the most important thing that we can step on the own interests and to think about the common interests of the region. It is the peace and stability, and because the debate about the South China Sea is not actually is not the issue between the ASEAN country and China, but right now it became the regional issue that concerning to the regional security, and beyond it, that go beyond it is issue of the each big power real intention on the future order in the region and over the world.
For the information of the body, I'm from Mindanao. It's a farthest island from north. I mean, we're on the southern part. And any armed conflict between the Philippines or with China or with anyone would greatly entail development in our island. We are going to be the first who will suffer. Mindanao will be the first. With the recent development, especially with the president from our island, we're expecting a lot of developments. Business economy is improving, and we're given special attention by Imperial Manila. We call that Imperial Manila because usually it's Manila who decides. Manila, capital city, decides how they divide the wealth. So with this development that the president is from Mindanao, we're hoping and we're very hopeful that finally development will come to our island. And with regards to armed conflict, I better send Representative Roque to do word war, not war using arms. So that's my opinion.
One to last question.
Just for Mr. Roque in your explanation. Oh, I'm Peter Langen at Asia Times. Right. I just want to walk back through this if you can give me a few minutes just to understand it clearly. The Philippines brought the case and it was heard at the Permanent Court in The Hague, and a decision was given July this year and fully supported the Philippines in this and rejected this 9-dash line claimed by China. According to my understanding, China completely rejected that ruling. But as you've just explained it, which I thought was very interesting, that China is now allowing fishing vessels from the Philippines into the areas around Scarborough. And you've, I think, made your point clear of your feelings about the United States. So do you see now the way forward as one where basically international powers, the US in particular, should butt out and allow you to negotiate with China and other countries directly with China to bring resolution over the land issues that you say are outside the jurisdiction of this ruling. Would that be a fair interpretation?
That would be a fair interpretation, especially since America has no business at all as far as the disputed land territory is concerned. As I said, they don't even recognize their title to these islands, having purchased the island from Spain. And therefore, they have absolutely no interest in the territorial dispute, as in fact, they have made this very clear, that they do not take any position, they do not take any sides on the ongoing territorial dispute. So it is better at this point to leave us alone and negotiate the issue of the conflicting claims to the islands.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, follow up. To follow up. And that's that.
We're approaching the US presidential election. I just wonder whether you have any comments on what you think the outcome of that could mean. For example, if in the event of a Clinton victory, would it be fair to expect a reversion to the status quo? In other words, the relative power of the US as it is. And in the event of a Trump victory, would you expect a step back by the US and an attempt to leave the countries of the region to decide their own affairs?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I used to head a think tank on international legal studies, no? And the reason why we were created by Congress was we wanted to follow the American model, that there is continuity as far as international relations and international law issues are concerned. And I'm raising this now because one good thing that we want to follow from the US is consistency in foreign affairs, regardless of who is president. So it really doesn't matter much if the Republicans or the Democrats win. They seem to have consistent foreign policy. They know what the U.S. national interest is, and they would pursue it. Now, of course, with the Trump presidency, I could see more erratic statements, no, similar to what our president's been saying, as far as China and Russia are concerned. And with the Clinton victory, you would have a more guarded declarations. But I'm really convinced that foreign policy in the U.S. has been very consistent, and it serves no one else's interest but American interest.
Very short follow-up.
Mr. Roque, you said the judgment of the court says that there is no ownership of the Scarborough Shoal. But you know, the UNCLOS says there is no island. It's only rock. So you cannot talk about the ownership because these only rocks cannot be owned by the Philippines.
Well, let me clarify you on that point. The tribunal was ambiguous enough and did not address the issue of whether or not Panatag is an island. And the reason, of course, is, again, it would not have jurisdiction because the Chinese maintain that although there are only 5 very small rocks in Scarborough, and I wish I had my PowerPoint presentation so you would see how small these rocks are, just enough for one person to stand on it. The Chinese, though, argue that Panatag belongs to a very long island, which includes Macclesfield Bank, which they call Hoang, and they characterize this as a 202 nautical mile island, even if everything is underwater. So the tribunal conveniently did not discuss it. Maybe they thought, we don't want to discuss it, we don't need to discuss it. But what they did say is that we're only talking of rocks in the region. All the disputed islands are rocks. What's the significance? Under 121, rocks cannot sustain human habitation. They can only generate territorial seas. So what the tribunal said was something that the claimants have said all along, that none of the disputed islands can generate exclusive economic zones. only 12 nautical miles, and that's in the decision. So in fact, even if there are only 5 rocks there, miserable rocks in Scarborough, the tribunal still said it was a rock that could generate 12 nautical miles of territorial sea.
Thank you. Peter, last follow-up. Short one, thank you.
So it's a question for Mr. Siao. I note from the introduction that you are actually a member of the Public Safety Committee of the Congress of the Philippines. So could you comment on the ongoing criticism of the President's reported extrajudicial executions of suspected drug traffickers in your country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is my opinion. There's no proof of any extrajudicial killings. Actually, these are being portrayed in the media as if it is state-sponsored. But if you look closely, you know how sometimes this drug syndicates or organization cleanse themselves. That's how we are looking at it right now. That's what this are more of the informations that we got from the police. So if this is indeed sponsored, then we have NGOs, we have advocates that are really against this. So rest assured that everything is in order, and no human rights violation is being what's the right word for that? Being violated.
Well, thank you very much for giving us these direct insights about the rocks in the region from the related experts and officials. And we as journalists, we really would like to visit these rocks and make reports directly there, but it's very dangerous, they tell us.
I'm going. In fact, you know, I blame this correspondent of the Philippine largest newspaper. I told him about it right after the state visit that fishing can resume. I was going to invite him. I was going to bring all my clients, about 1,000 of them, whom I give individual fishing, small fishing boats to, and we will go and fish together. But of course, the nature of journalism is a scoop, so he reported on it. So my plan, though, was to go, but I can't go without minimal comfort. So if anyone can lend me a yacht, I will use that yacht and I will go to Scarborough Shoal with the fishermen. And you're welcome to come along, provided you borrow the yacht.
Sure, we will think about it. And this wraps up our event, and thank you for coming. Please give a big hand to our guests, and we hope to see you again. And have a nice evening. Thanks.